Every year, hundreds of people go missing in national parks and forests all across North America. Often, these disappearances happen under very strange circumstances. A former police detective named David Politis, along with the Can-Am Missing Project, have put thousands upon thousands of hours of investigation into these strange cases, and the result is a book and film series called Missing 411. I've left links in the description that will take you to the Can-Am Missing Project website where the books and films can be purchased. Today we'll be looking at 4 more of these strange cases from Appalachia, but these are not so well known, and not the cases you see featured on other channels. Of course, the segments will be shorter since there's not nearly as much information available, but they're strange nonetheless. So now, on to the stories. On August 9, 1958, the Greenhill family was moving into a new house along a 154-acre reservoir just outside of Olive Hill, Kentucky. The Greenhill's new home was situated in a sparsely populated valley surrounded by rolling hills, 2 miles down a dirt road. In kind of an odd arrangement, the Greenhills were moving in before the sellers moved out, with the agreement that the seller would remain for a few more days during the transition. While the adults were moving their things into the house, 2-year-old Debbie was out playing in the yard alongside the house. Mrs. Greenhill last saw Debbie playing by herself at about 7:45 p.m. When she went back to check 20 minutes later, Debbie was gone. The Greenhills and the seller's family searched the area but came up empty. One of the adults put in a call to the local police department, who also notified the sheriff's department and the Kentucky State Police, who began an organized search effort. After the second day, police suspected that Debbie had been kidnapped since she had not been found in any of the organized search grids. Weather was a major hampering factor. 2 severe rainstorms had hit the Olive Hill area in the hours after Debbie disappeared. By the end of the third day, authorities were certain Debbie had been kidnapped and requested assistance from the FBI. The Bureau were quoted as saying that given the evidence that they had, they did not believe that the young girl was kidnapped, but would authorize 4 agents to assist with the investigation. Authorities dragged the reservoir but found nothing. Dog teams used throughout the search could not find young Debbie's scent. On August 13th, so day 5 of the search, a National Guard soldier participating in the search effort was about 3/4 of a mile from the Greenhill home when he heard a young girl sobbing. This crying led the searcher to 2-year-old Debbie, who was naked and found 150 feet up from the reservoir sitting on the ground, in an area that had been previously searched a few times. The searcher noted that her face was stained red from the local berries. The searcher took her down to the water and put her on a boat, which took her to an ambulance. The doctor who examined Debbie said that, other than some scratches and bruises, Debbie was in remarkably good condition, showing no signs of malnutrition. She had been missing for 90 hours, with the only source of food being the local berries, which were plentiful at that time of year. Debbie's clothing was never found. On October 8, 1976, 16-year-old Trenny Gibson was one of 40 students on a field trip to hike in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The plan was for the children to hike from Andrews Bald to Clingman's Dome. Along the hike, the students were separated into groups, and Trenny found herself moving along from group to group as the day went on. Around 3 p.m., the group she was with was along the Appalachian Trail, about half a mile from the Clingman's Dome parking lot, when Trenny vanished. The area where she was last seen was a well-defined part of the trail, with rugged forests on both sides of the trail. The National Park Service was notified, and at 9:15 p.m., The weather was noted to be extremely windy with heavy rain and temperatures down around freezing. Given the weather conditions, the official search would not begin until 7 a.m. the next morning. One of the chaperones, Counselor Wayne Dunlap, told authorities that Trenny was not the type who would run away or willfully disappear. Members of the group that Trenny was with said the group stopped for a short break, and Trenny continued ahead a short distance and bent over near a flat rock to look at something, and the next second she was gone. If she had continued further up the trail, the group should have been able to see her. Several students went up to the area where she had last been seen, and all of them said that the area right off the trail was too rough with rocks and bushes and trees for someone to just walk off. On October 11th, the Civil Air Patrol contacted the Search Command Center saying he had 40 men, several pilots and planes, along with 2 doctors ready to assist with the search, but unfortunately, the National Park Service ignored these volunteers and they were basically turned away. 2 agents from the FBI Knoxville office arrived to assist on October 13th, but they said they were only looking for, quote, any violation of federal law, and so far they have found no evidence of a crime, unquote. It should be noted that to this day, the FBI refuses to release the files for this case. 300 people participated in the search, which ran from October 8th to the 22nd. Assets used during the search included canines, helicopters, sheriff's deputies, trackers, rescue squads, and airplanes. 6 months later, on April 7, 1977, Robert Gibson, Trenny's father, asked the National Park Service to conduct another thorough search where his daughter had been last seen. He had hundreds of volunteers wanting to help out. The park superintendent would only allow 25 searchers to, quote, minimize the backcountry use and to avoid a circus atmosphere, unquote. No trace of Trenny Gibson has ever been found. How does someone just vanish while in the company of many people? 1 second they're there, the next they're gone. What do you think? On May 1st, 1994, Victor and Nettie Shoemaker, along with their son Victor Jr., who was also known as JR, were at their grandfather's home near the Short Mountain Wildlife Area. This is a typical family gathering that happened 4 times a year. On that Sunday, JR and his 2 cousins went to their normal place to play, into the forest, where they would play hunting games. Normally, when they would get tired, all 3 would come back out and head up to the house to eat. Their grandfather Oscar had owned the property for many years, and during that time had amassed a collection of junk, including assorted building materials and old vehicles. The property was very isolated, with only a single neighbor, and a long winding road leading from the highway to the property. After playing with his cousins for a couple hours, JR said that he was getting hungry, and so he headed back toward Grandpa's house. The 2 cousins decided to stay out and play a while longer, and an hour later they themselves made their way back to the house. When they got back and realized JR had never made it, JR's father had the boys take him back to where they last saw the boy. After looking around the general area, they contacted the authorities. Within a couple hours, numerous volunteers arrived to help search, but a storm moved into the area, and the temperatures quickly dropped to around freezing. For 5 days, approximately 350 people searched what ended up being a 2.5-mile radius from the home, using helicopters with thermal sensors, police from several jurisdictions, the Appalachian Search and Rescue Team, and scores of volunteers. No one found a thing. Police interviewed the 2 cousins several times and believed that foul play was not involved, as well as ruling out a potential hunting accident. A family member reported to the Freelance Star newspaper on May 3rd that a searcher had found a spot where they believed the boy could have slept. What they found was 3 rocks laid out in a triangle, with a stick in the center, 3 logs on the sides, and some freshly disturbed soil. They didn't say exactly where this was found. Oddly, when the news media got to the family, one of the young cousins, when asked what he thought had happened, told a reporter that, quote, somebody hiding behind a tree got up and grabbed him, unquote. On May 6th, the official search was terminated. However, volunteers continued searching for weeks. An interview with a BCI agent said that there were no indications of foul play and that the state did ask for the FBI's assistance. This case has divided a family, given that JR's immediate family has not spoken to the cousins' families since his disappearance. One final footnote to this case: a dark blue 1990 pickup, make and model unknown, was seen in the area around the time that JR disappeared. It's unknown if this truck is connected to the case, but police have been interested in speaking to the driver. This case remains open and unsolved. On the afternoon of Saturday, January 9th, 1965, 9-year-old Bonnie Edwards was playing with neighborhood kids in an area within sight of their farmhouse, which was around 2 miles outside of Pilot Mountain, North Carolina. Bonnie had a disability that limited her mental acuity to that of a 6-year-old, so she always preferred to stick close to home. That afternoon, after playing for some time, she told the other kids that she was tired and was going home. She was last seen walking directly toward their farmhouse. She never arrived. Her parents notified the local authorities at 4:30 p.m. The sheriff quickly gathered nearly 1,000 volunteers, as well as local fire, police, and National Guard with helicopter assets to assist in the official search. The next day at around 4 p.m., a searcher came across a horrible sight. 9-year-old Bonnie was curled up in a brush pile within eyeshot of her home. She was clearly deceased. The county coroner, who at that time was oddly a dentist, requested another local physician conduct a post-mortem examination, and this physician determined that young Bonnie had died of exposure early Sunday morning. It's uncertain just how detailed of an examination actually took place. The night that Bonnie was missing, Saturday the 9th, temperatures dropped to 39 degrees. Hundreds of searchers had combed the immediate area, including the area where Bonnie was later found, which was searched no less than 3 separate times with no results. If Bonnie had been in the area while the searches were in progress, it makes sense to think that she would have sought help. Did the searchers simply miss her 3 separate times? What's your thoughts? So, that's going to do it for this episode of the Sheldrake Files. As always, if you haven't done so already, if this is the kind of content you're into, give us a like, and make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads. If you have any story suggestions, I can be reached by direct message on these social media platforms. So, from all of us here at the Sheldrake Files, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.